now. So again, Kieren, James-Lubin of BlockApps, and you're going to be giving us some interesting and relevant case studies. So we're excited to hear what you have. Do we have
Thank
you
you.
there? All right, I see you
Right.
there. So it's
Let me
all yours.
just
Take over.
share my screen quickly here. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to really try to stay to time. So I have about 10 slides, 1 minute each, which leaves about time for one real case study. So hopefully Paul will have a good second one. Very quickly on us, we've been in the sort of enterprise blockchain sector really from the beginning. In fact, we helped sort of create the category, both launching blockchain as a service with Microsoft kind of late 2015, early 2016, and also helping to found the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, which we remain board member of. So what we mean by enterprise blockchain technology has sort of changed over the years. In the very early days, there was the idea that you would consume blockchain technology really just like other platform services, databases, ERPs, cloud, et cetera. It's definitely changed in the last few years. There's been a lot more focus even on the enterprise sort of no crypto, let's say, side on deploying larger industry networks that interconnect more parties, but are still sort of focused on specific needs of business, and less so on fully open systems, especially with cryptocurrency. John Whelan, who you may have heard from earlier, you'll hear from later, is fond of 3Ps, privacy, permission, and performance. That's really what we aimed ourselves at in the early days of the company, and increasingly have moved up the application stack. So providing solutions for specific industries, like Trace Harvest, which was developed in partnership with Bayer Crop Science, one of our big customers, which I'll end up talking about today. So thinking about just sort of a backdrop, like why should businesses, big businesses, small businesses be interested in blockchain technology? Again, we're thinking about an audience that's not really crypto-centric. It's not, these are not necessarily technology enthusiasts. Certainly some of these people are at these big businesses, but the majority are sort of looking for just solutions to their problems that provide a financial return, or just an easier day-to-day set of operations, et cetera. And what we're seeing is that, global trade's way up. So there's a lot more collaboration, smaller world in some ways. This creates more competition also. Companies have to move a lot faster, and that's driving greater reliance on external companies. So your average enterprise, let's say in the Fortune 500, probably has 5, 10, 20,000 vendors. There are big sectors of outsourcing that are growing really rapidly. Cloud, obviously, but things like contract manufacturing too. Companies are entrusting major operations to external parties so that they can focus on their differentiation. You don't have vertical integration anymore. And a lot of the IT systems that these enterprises depend on were designed with a very internal-centric mindset, ERPs in particular, in which the enterprise could be assumed to sort of have total information about what's going on. And it turns out that that's, of course, not the case. And there needs to be a new architecture for the way business is done kind of going forward. And this is really coming on the last 18 to 24 months. Sustainability has always been, in the public discussion, but enormous increase recently. Big change in consumer preferences. It used to be that organic was enough. Now, what does organic mean? Consumers really want to know where their food comes from, how products are manufactured, what are the operations that companies use? Are they using the right sort of labor? All that sort of thing. So there's, at the same time as a much more complex business environment, tremendous pressure on companies to be more transparent in their more complex operations. And so what this means is you've got to kind of design your IT systems to fit this future and present, if you will. And there have been approaches to this to date. So The left-hand side, basically, you can imagine a company with a database, an ERP, they're working with externals, and they've got some sort of direct connectivity. APIs, emailing each other spreadsheets is still quite common in the business world. And what you find is it doesn't really scale very well because there's no real traceability. There's not a standard data model across all the companies, et cetera. And on the right-hand side, so in industries where you have lots and lots of transactions, for instance, you find people create intermediaries to help manage those transactions. So in financial services, think like the Swifts, the DTCCs of the world, who do a great job, but there becomes a certain challenge in that these parties can become sort of a restrictive bottlenecks in certain cases. So if companies A, B, C, and D want to do something, they kind of have to either get the permission of the intermediary or find some other means of moving forward. I'm sure this is not a surprise to blockchain people, but when you're thinking about the business audience who's a little bit less familiar with blockchain, we tend to be positioning it this way. Of course, very simply, this solution of deploying blockchains kind of gives you a sort of best of both worlds, in which you have the freedom to operate of having internal systems, but standardization by default, data integrity, traceability, and it helps the enterprises operate, well, helps them manage technologically the way they're increasingly operating today. So just a little bit on how our product is structured. What we found over the years is actually that the blockchain part can be the easy part. So we kind of just devote one layer in the stack to it. STRATO is our product. It's, of course, based on Ethereum. And part of the reason we helped to found the EEA is that, at least at the time, there were certain features that enterprises needed that did not exist in Ethereum itself. I would say it's still the case today. And we wanted to standardize those extensions kind of under a common roof so that the enterprises felt comfortable that they had sort of choice in vendors and all that sort of thing. So a lot of what we end up doing is deploying middleware. So the blockchain in it is a spectacular. It's a great technology, but people are not going to throw out all of the IT systems they have today, which means you have to integrate with them. And so we find that that's often the hardest part of implementing the software. And we've developed a suite of kind of off-the-shelf connectors, et cetera, to make that easier as you go. We've sort of based frameworks from a smart contract perspective that capture common data models across different applications. So, and trace harvest is one that I'll talk about in detail today. But we've actually started to develop specific applications aimed at particular use cases and industries. Given that we've kind of solved the lower layers, what we find is customers are really looking for a specific problem solved, and it's quite a bit easier in certain ways to work with the direct interested parties in that problem versus going purely with the platform, working with the IT organization and having them build out additionally the solution to that problem. So we still do both. We have plenty of customers that just consume our platform, but also have moved up the stack to the industry sort of application layer, we call it, in which we're solving a problem for a business end user. So just a quick spotlight on trace harvest, which I mentioned again, has been developed over a number of years in production with Bayer Crop Science. So big challenge is basic traceability. So agricultural products generally are not tracked from the seed kind of in genetics origination point all the way through the consumer. In part, this is because there's a commodity, mindset, if you will, but just set of business practices where, a seed is just a seed, a bushel is just a bushel. That's changing, right? So sustainably sourced products, specialty products can be more profitable for everyone along the chain, but require more transparency in operations, more tracking of what's going on to prove to the end buyer, if that's an actual consumer, a consumer packaged good firm, a retailer, what it actually is. Am I buying the thing that I think I'm buying that merits the higher price? Another interesting business practice we've learned over the years is returns in particular. So bag of seed can be good for a number of years. And the business practice in the sector is that you pretty much have to take the returns, and pay full face value. And so these companies that manufacture seed are potentially have a large liability for outstanding inventory. And they don't know, for instance, they go through distributors before they go to the growers. The growers don't necessarily notify them when planting occurs. So they don't know what the level of outstanding inventory is. More or less the same problem happens with recalls. The lack of tracking downstream in the supply chain exposes the manufacturers of food products to big risks financially. So that's another problem that Trace Harvest solves. Compliance also is a big concern, and especially as some of the products require regulatory approval in agribusiness. We've been able to greatly lower the costs and risks around compliance by, again, having much greater visibility further down in the supply chain. So I know I'm just about out of time. Here's what it looks like. Platform, STRATO on the right, just a quick screenshot of the application on the left, and just a sense of the ecosystem we're dealing with here. So we're starting at the seed source, so those are the seed providers on the left, and then moving through distribution, those are the dealers, to growers, on to the processing firms, CPGs, retailers, et cetera, and touching lots of tech companies along the way and other folks. So thank you very much. I know I'm like a minute over, so
yeah,